A steward is a person who is in charge of someone else's property or possessions. If you have a steward who, in some cases, in old times, lived with the family, that steward was in charge of the house, maybe fellow workers, the business, even the money. The master puts the steward in charge of all these things because he trusts the steward. And he believes that the steward has his best interests in mind. The steward treats the possessions entrusted to him with care, as if they were his own. None of the master's possessions belong to the steward, but the steward is there to serve the master. In today's first reading, St. Paul calls himself a steward of God's grace. In other words, he knew that the Lord had entrusted to him the care of God's people. Paul was to proclaim the gospel to all in the name of Christ. Paul did not own God's grace. The gospel was not his own. He was to share it. What he had received, he was to share through his preaching and his ministry. Paul understood that he had been entrusted with a serious ministry. And as we know from Paul's writings, he was not afraid to do what he had to do to be that good steward. Now, since this was the case for St. Paul, of course, it's all of our responsibilities to be stewards of the Lord's grace, stewards of the gospel. Christians everywhere are called to know God's will and to be ready to be accountable for how we use God's grace when the Lord returns. If we have squandered the gospel, if we wasted away God's grace by failing to live the gospel fully, or selfishly taking advantage of what has been entrusted to us, then we will be held accountable. Jesus describes the master who returns and finds his stewards abusing their authority or just sitting around doing nothing. They will be punished severely. But if we have been found to be good stewards, carefully and lovingly living and sharing the gospel, serving others with love, then we will be rewarded. Jesus says we will be given a larger share of God's grace and participate in his kingdom in a greater way. I'm sure you have the same experiences as I do. When I was much younger, my parents, would sometimes go out on a day trip or take a few days, here and there somewhere. They leave us three boys at home. I don't know if people would do that today, but we were all teenagers at the time. And we were old enough to take care of things and to go about business in the house. We were to take care of the house, the pets, do our chores, go to school, things like that. We knew what we had to do. But if my parents, when they returned, saw that the house was a mess or that we had failed to fulfill some of our responsibilities, then we'd be punished. We'd lose our privileges and we'd have to somehow earn their trust again. And in the same way, the Lord has left us in charge of matters until he comes again. Of course, Christ isn't absent. He's always present, assisting us in fulfilling our calling. But we have the freedom to not cooperate with his assistance. We can live for ourselves if we choose. We can look after ourselves. We can overlook the needs of others. We can be apathetic about the condition of other people. We can disregard our responsible care for the world that we have been given. If this is the case, then we have failed to fulfill our role as the Lord's stewards. Our punishment may well involve being denied a place in the kingdom. So by the Eucharist that we receive every day, really the Lord is strengthening us to be good stewards of all of his gifts. We should use that grace for our own well-being, of course, but also use it to tend to the care of our neighbors in our world. And in the end, when the master of the house returns, however that happens for us, at the end of our personal lives or at the end of time, we will want to hear the Lord say to us, "Well done, good and faithful stewards. Now inherit the kingdom I have prepared."